I was at the edge of a mountain, a big cliff. I was at the top holding a rope. I was holding a rope and looking down, down, down. Because behind me was a big, long drop. So I was rappelling. In English, in American English, we say rappelling. This is when you have a rope and then you go down the side of a mountain. So you're at the top and you go down, down, down to the bottom. Some of the military guys do this, where they go very fast. This was my first time rappelling. I was looking down this huge cliff, and I could feel my whole body getting tight. My hands just were gripping, grabbing the rope so much that they were hurting. My breathing was tight. So I was kind of breathing quickly, and my throat was tight, so it was hard for me to talk at all. The instructor was next to me. He said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Yes, I'm ready." My body was shaking a little bit. Even though I was tight, I was kind of shaking. And time seemed to move differently. Time seemed to go much more slowly. It was extremely terrifying because I was very afraid of heights. Now I still don't like heights. I still get quite nervous in high places. But at that time in the past, I was terrified of heights. Terrified. Then I began to slowly go back, lean back, grabbing the rope, and then start walking down the side of the cliff, hand over hand with my feet against the cliff. And as I did, I remember, my breathing was still very fast, and I remember just staring straight ahead. All I could look at were my hands on the rope. It's like my vision, my sight became very narrow, like I was looking down a tunnel. I couldn't really see anything to the sides or below or above, just only straight ahead. And slowly, little by little, I went down the mountain until I got to the bottom. And then, of course, this huge relief. I just fell on the ground and, oh my God, I was sweating. I was exhausted. The whole thing, it only took maybe 5 minutes, but my whole drop, my whole rappelling down the side of this mountain, but it felt like it was an hour or more. It felt like a long, long time. This is the power of fear. The power of fear. Of course, we know fear is an emotion. It's something that's in our minds. It brings up all these terrible images in our head. I was imagining falling to my death. But fear is also physical. It's physical. It's in our bodies also. And these reactions, these things I described, are common to all fearful situations, including giving a public speech. Or for some people, just speaking English, speaking a foreign language, can create some of this fear. Now, of course, there are different levels of this fear. On the mountain, that was extreme fear for me. But we can have a lesser amount of that also, where these same things happen, but just not as strongly. And when we face something that's scary, something that makes us nervous, it is indeed these same physical reactions that happen. These reactions I described are very common. If your life is threatened, if someone's threatening you with a weapon, like a knife, they're going to attack you, you would feel many of these same sensations, these same things would happen in your body. That's what makes fear so difficult to overcome, because it's not just in your brain. If it was just in your mind, you could distract yourself and you would feel instantly better and do what you want to do. But it's also in your body, and when it gets into your body like that, it's very strong and it's hard to change. So what are these things that happen? There's some common things. Number one, I mentioned my vision. This is called tunnel vision in English, tunnel vision. And that's where, normally we can see quite a lot to each side. This is called peripheral vision. You're looking straight ahead, but you can also see what's happening off to the left and off to the right. You can see what's happening down underneath you and what above. You have this big wide angle of vision. That's normal. But when you are afraid, that gets more narrow. You can only see in front of you. And when you're really, really afraid, when you're terrified, when you're super nervous, then you get tunnel vision when you can only see directly ahead. And to the sides just becomes dark. So tunnel vision happens. It's a common fear reaction. We mentioned the breathing. Your breathing changes, typically gets faster. Faster and less deep. It becomes more shallow. Like you're like a little rabbit that's scared. That's the extreme example, right? But your breathing becomes faster and more shallow. Tension, tightness. Your muscles can tighten, right? You're not loose and relaxed. When you feel good, you're loose, you're relaxed. The muscles are softer. But when you are afraid or nervous, they become tighter. And again, when I was on that mountaintop, they were super tight. I mean, my hands especially were just incredibly tight, but my whole body, in fact, was tight. It was exhausting. After just 5 minutes, I was completely physically exhausted. Sweating can happen. Some people get sweating in their hands, but you can also just get sweating your whole body. You can sweat. These are the common things that happen. These are physical fear reactions. So our question becomes how to deal with this. How can we handle these reactions? And can we? Let's imagine you have a lot of nervousness about speaking English. And then you go to a party or you go to some meeting, and there are a lot of native speakers. You see a lot of Americans, for example. And you want to talk, you want to practice your English, but suddenly you get some of this fear reaction. Maybe not so strong like me on the mountain, but maybe a little bit. Maybe you feel a little tighter. Your breathing gets a little faster. You might feel your hands might sweat a little bit. Your tunnel vision, your vision might get a little more narrow. All of things can happen in a little bit, in little amounts also. And the problem is when these things happen, these physical reactions, then your brain also changes. The mental part of fear is that your deep thinking, your complicated thinking, your high intelligence shuts down. It starts to turn off. In that situation where I was hanging from the mountain, for example, I was feeling so much fear that my high intelligence, my complex brain probably was off completely. Meaning, I could not think about complicated things. For example, if you gave me a difficult math problem at that time, maybe I couldn't do it. I might say, I don't know, because it's this part of the brain kind of turns off, and the primitive, the old part of the brain becomes the strongest. It takes control. That part of the brain that's in the back. It's the part of the brain that's just focused on emotion mostly, on fighting or running away. So difficult, complicated thoughts become more difficult when you are afraid, when you are nervous. This is why when you're feeling really relaxed, maybe your English feels better. Maybe you can actually speak much better. We all know the situation where someone is nervous and they can't speak English very well. But then they drink a beer or 2 beers. Suddenly they become more relaxed and they start speaking more and more and more. It's like, what happened? Now they can speak. It's interesting, right? I saw this in Korea, my first job. I would sometimes go out at night with the Korean staff of our school. And when we first arrived at the pub. They were shy, they couldn't speak well. But as they had 1 or 2 drinks, suddenly their speaking became better and better. It was interesting. We used to joke about it. But now I understand why. It's because alcohol pushes down the fear. It pushes down that emotion. And when the fear goes down and then the body relaxes, alcohol also relaxes your body. When that happens, then the brain, the higher brain, the complex brain, can turn on again. And when the brain turns on again, then suddenly starts speaking. and the speaking becomes easier. Interesting, very interesting. So I guess drinking would be one solution, probably not a good solution, especially in a job, maybe at a party or something. But if you're in a serious situation, you don't want to depend on drinking beer or alcohol. The good news is that you can train yourself to overcome fear. There are a few ways to do this. Let's talk about ways to overcome fear and build your confidence. And we'll specifically talk about fear and confidence with speaking. But these methods, these techniques work for anyone in any fearful situation. There are kind of two ways I think of to handle the fear. Two general ways. One way is to channel. That's where you take that energy. There's a fearful energy. It's a physical energy, right? Your body's tightening. The beating of your heart gets faster. Your breathing gets faster. All of these things happen. Once they start happening, once they start getting stronger, it's very difficult to stop them. So instead of trying to stop them at that point, you can channel them. In other words, you use that energy, but you focus it in a positive direction. This is what I do, and especially in the past, what I used to do for public speaking. So my heart would start beating faster before a speech. My breathing would get faster, and I'd start feeling this nervous energy. I would shake. My hands would shake a little bit. At that time, it was very difficult to calm down. So instead, what I decided, I will use this energy. So I started to jump around and play exciting music. So that instead of feeling fear, I used that energy, I changed it into excitement. I changed it into enthusiasm. Right? So I took that energy and just made it more positive. So then, when I make a speech or when I made a speech, I would be very energetic. Hi, I'm AJ. And I would walk around the stage and use a loud voice and move my arms and hands a lot. It worked. It worked very well. Gradually over time, as I did more and more and more and more speeches, I became less nervous before the speech. So that eventually I don't need to, for example, now I don't need to make myself quite so excited. I do it just to make myself feel good, to get in a excited mindset, but I'm not really afraid anymore of speaking publicly. I still might get a little nervous if it's a new group, if it's a strange situation, and then I might use this technique. But mostly now I use the technique just for fun, just so I'm a better speaker. But in the beginning, I used this technique to overcome fear. Actually, not to overcome it, but to use the fear and change it into something else. So that's technique number one. Technique number two is to calm your body before the fear gets strong. So this is where you might use meditation techniques, for example, to keep your body calm before the fear becomes too strong. So let's use the public speaking example again. You're going to speak in maybe 30 minutes. You feel the fear starting. The nervousness is starting. And so at that moment, you sit down, you close your eyes, and you focus on taking long, deep breaths. Remember, short breathing, fast breathing is common with fear. So you want to do the opposite. Take long, deep breaths into your stomach, very exaggerated long breaths.